that. The topic on my mind of late has been mostly a personal one, has been mostly just about balance, which I
Mhm.
thought seemed kind of relevant to some of what you're going through. I saw your post about getting rid of the dad bod and I was thinking about it. I'm like, damn, like I'm way out of shape right now. I'm in the worst shape I've been in years,
Wow.
and it all happened in the last 2 months when I got very focused on a work project, a couple of work projects, just buried myself in them, set everything else aside. Just 2 months. That's it, and it feels like everything else just kind of fell apart that
Mhm.
fast. I find that really interesting because we talk a lot about the value of focusing and having just one thing to progress an area of your life beyond anything else you want. And to be fair, the amount of shit I've learned in the last 2 months is ridiculous. I've at least a year and a half of learning packed into 2 months.
Mhm.
But there was a huge cost to that, and I'm kind of reflecting on that right now as I get back to the gym, you know. How did you find yourself kind of realizing that, hey, I'm letting my health and fitness slide, other things are falling apart?
Well, the health thing's been an issue for me since actually before my daughter was born. Um, and I think we'll just make this the topic today. Let's just keep going and we'll just use this. Uh, because I've got the genetic heart issue, so I've got the high cholesterol. Even if I'm totally awesome, I have high cholesterol. So my dad had his heart attack when he was in his 50s. I mean, he survived it, but after that, he has to eat like a monk for the rest of his life and exercise every day hard out, or he's going to die, basically. So I've always thought, like, I want to be around for Chloe. I'm going to get my health sorted. But with the COVID fucking nightmare happening and everything, at the very least, I had good excuses that I could use to delay it, but also some quite reasonable barriers, like I literally can't go shopping for food and stuff like that. But anyway, so since Chloe's been born, I've gone down the path that many dads go, basically, where you just anything that's yours personally gets put aside and you're just all about the family, and I've been like that. So I'm either working, which is also for the family, or I'm taking care of Chloe, or I'm helping Lucy with something, and that's it. That's all I'm doing. That's my entire life. No hobbies, no social life, nothing. No exercise. And with the sleep deprivation in particular, so there's two factors. One is like very sleep deprived, which makes it very hard to exercise. And it's possibly not even a good idea to exercise because you can't heal. Like you can't do heavy workouts at the very least, or your muscles just going to get wrecked. From what I read, anyway. Plus, we don't. I've whinged about this a lot, but we don't have support. So Chloe's always around, which means things like the regular food shopping you'd need to do to like maintain a healthy diet, like how you got to prep meals and think through things. We're more like constant last minute grabs and ordering and just anything to get through the day. And it's not that that was the only option available, but in the state we're in, we're looking for a path of least resistance at any point, because we're constantly doing the path of most resistance all the time. So anyway, that kind of got into a bit of I guess inertia that just became the way we're living. Now
See,
Chloe's
I
more
think
independent and stuff, and I realized actually, when am I going to break out of this? Because there's never going to be an invitation to do it. I'd have to go now.
no,
Now
there's
it has to
not.
change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Essentially, the pressure builds. Yeah, this is such a relevant topic, I think, for the Brojo guys, because so many of the guys are having kids right now, starting families. I probably know at least 10 that are either pregnant or have newborns of my close friend circle. It's time.
Mm.
And I remember when my kids were little, yeah, it felt like my whole life was just hijacked.
Yeah.
None of my time was my own. It was survival mode. You sleep when you can, you eat whatever's available. You're just getting by barely. But then there was a shift for me when my kids reached about 3 years old, where they were kind of autonomous enough. I could sit them down for a moment. They could play. I could bring toys. I could take them places. They could actually walk. They didn't have to be carried everywhere. And they needed to get out and do things. So I kind of rearranged my world around that. If I needed to get fruit to eat healthy, it was a trip. It was a family trip. Take my kids, we'd go for a walk. Yeah, it would take 30% longer, maybe more. But it ended up basically killing a couple birds with one stone. We got bonding time. They got to learn things. We all got out. We were eating more healthily. Everything in my world, hobbies, hanging out with friends, going for walks, going to the gym, doing yoga. Started a Japanese drumming team. I mean, basically, when they got to that age, they could actually be a part of my life kind of in parallel
Yeah.
rather than interfering. And the reason I find this really interesting was that somehow I found that very grounding. It kind of balanced me because I had to spend time with them. Now my kids are grown and I don't have that grounding, right? And there's no one saying, hey, we need to spend time with you. We need to go do things. We need to get out and get exercise. We need to go have friends. And so when I get wrapped up in something like a work project, that's it, man. I'm lost. I'm down the rabbit hole, and there's no one here to pull me out. And I find it really interesting to realize that I have to do that for myself now. I have to somehow find a way to say, no, it's not going to happen. I have to create my own demands, to create a balanced schedule. Yeah, how old is Chloe now?
Yeah, so Chloe's about to turn 2.
Okay.
And I could see, like, you're talking about the writing on the wall a little bit, like, as her independence grows and stuff, I can see a future where, including her in my stuff, I don't know about my work, but yeah, health and fitness and stuff like that, I could see her helping me prepare meals up on a little stool on the bench and stuff. If I was to do it right now, she'd just throw shit everywhere. But she's very close to not being like that, I think. She's slowly, she can eat with a fork and stuff now. It's getting like very promising signs that she might be, able to participate. She actually quite enjoys what I'll say is she likes climbing on me when I'm doing push-ups, so we're halfway there. Gives me extra weight, yes, extra resistance until she gets bored and starts like punching me in the face. But yeah, so I like that idea. I think, yeah, if you said 3 years old, it sounds about right. I think I'm about a year off her being not a burden, but more of a participant. Like if I go shopping with her now, I mean, that is one way to get out of the house and do something, but, she's grabbing shit off the shelves and throwing it and stuff like that. It's not quite helpful at this point. It's more like I'd rather go without her, at this point. But what I was thinking of, coming back to your thing, and I think this is our issue. I don't know, when people have a 9-to-5 job, or they have kids, or they've got a bossy partner perhaps, or whatever, you have like an external on and off kind of management happening, right? Like, work ends now because we're shutting the shop up, and you need to come help me with dinner, so I guess I'm pulled out of whatever I was doing. And I don't know how this relates, but what popped into my head was actually dancing. So I'm a person where I have a limit. No matter how much I love an activity, there's a limit how long I can do it before I completely sort of crash on that activity. So whereas Lucy, she could dance all night, all day and not get bored, I go social dancing. There's a certain point in the night, it's different every night, a certain point of like, if I do one more dance, I'm going to hate this forever. Like I have to stop now. I have to go, especially I should have gone one dance ago. And I'm now to the point where I now feel like it's a chore and I'm killing, like I don't want that to be my last memory. And it's still something I'm practicing. Just dancing was the example where it first happened, where I had to choose to end it arbitrarily. Like there's no sign off externally. There's no sign that like this is the time. I had to just feel it out and go, now it has to stop now. And I do this like thing. Everyone's just getting going. I'm like, I'm actually getting going, literally. Like I'm out. And nobody could understand. I'm like, I can't explain it to you, but if I don't leave now, I'm never coming back,
Yeah, I've done that before as well. And I think you and I've both, we've talked a lot about the value of the Irish goodbye, just bailing when it's time. Because you need to take care of yourself, and trying to consider the expectations of others first is a death trap. You'll end up, hating your social world. And funny enough, I'm in exactly the same way about dance and about really all activities. Is there's a certain point where I'm full, If I go beyond that, it becomes work. I'm pushing myself out of any kind of like real enjoyable place to where there might be benefit, but I don't want it anymore. I
Yeah.
lose all sense of motivation. Yeah. And I'll find the same thing about work as well. What's interesting for me about work is that, particularly because, you know, you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, we do things that we love to do. And it's a huge space. Like you get bored with writing, you do a podcast. You get bored with a podcast, you do coaching. You get bored with coaching, start a new book, study something new. You know, there's a million things. And literally for the last 2 months, it feels like it was a week long for me. I was so deep that I find that there are certain aspects of my life that it's almost, rather than having a kind of aversive personality come out when I go too deep, I become more addicted. It's like, this is so much fun. Like, there's so many things, there's so much to learn. I can't stop. And I'll find myself going to bed at 2 a.m. in the morning and waking up at 6. And that's how my life's been for the
Mm.
last 2 months. And then one day I look in the mirror and I'm like, damn, when's the last time I went to the gym? you know, really? I can't remember. I think I still have a membership somewhere, you
Yeah.
know? Um, I find that really fascinating because in the moment, I'm barely aware of that trade off. And even to the degree that I am aware of it, for example, like ordering in way too much because I just don't have time to cook because I'm too busy working on this great thing and I don't want to stop now. So Uber Eats or whatever, run down the street and grab a, you know, taco or something like that. And you're kind of aware that this isn't a healthy, sustainable way to live. But the experience of being so wrapped in something you're so passionate about, it's just so all consuming. It's I call it Tesla syndrome because Nikola Tesla was famous for just, he didn't have a girlfriend, he didn't, his life was about his work. Da Vinci was quite similar, right? And there are certain people that you just get so absorbed in the thing that you're passionate about that everything else fades away, and it's not actually a healthy place to be. But you lose all sense of perspective on it. And I found once in a while I end up dipping my toe. I'm not anything like those guys, but I end up dipping my toe into that pond, and then I come out going, that wasn't like, I enjoyed it. I don't think I'm better for the experience. You know? Have you felt the same challenge?
Yeah, now I have some external pulls at the moment. A partner and a child are kind of unavoidable. I mean, I've heard of guys who are like, fuck them, and they just go do whatever they want, but I'm not that kind of guy. One of the upsides to having that people pleaser pathway in
Yeah.
my head is I can't be that ruthless. So I get pulled out, but I think of prior to, when I first started my business, I was doing 90-hour weeks. That was all I was doing, and my health plummeted. I had no social life, no hobbies, no reason why I couldn't. It's partly driven by the financial insecurity of getting started, but it was mostly just by the just obsession. It was an obsessive feeling, the drive, like you said, addictive. Couldn't get away from my computer, couldn't stop looking at things. You know what I think we're going to end up talking about or start talking about is the concept of discipline, which I've been thinking a lot more about lately. And a working definition I had going with a couple of clients was that discipline is about doing the right thing rather than what you feel like doing. And I think what we're talking about, and this is a problem with either obsessive, compulsive, behavior or procrastination type behavior, is you're going with what you feel like doing. And I think what we feel like doing is often misleading, often short-sighted, often about highs and lows, and not about long-term rewards. And it's even when I think about like the neglect. So what you've been doing with work, I've been doing with fatherhood, and I can make all sorts of noble narrative statements that justify that, and be very hard for someone to argue against without them looking like a bastard. See, I'm just doing the right thing as a father. You'd be like, fuck, can't argue with that. But the truth is, there is an obsessive quality to it, and there's a people-pleasing quality to it. You know, there are little moments where I'm spending extra time with Chloe because I know if I don't, like, Lucy will be stressed, which is actually caretaking her behavior. It's not really about being a dad. It's about making her less stressed so it doesn't bother me as much. It's very much at least the intention's got people-pleasing flavor to it. And I've relapsed quite a few times with people-pleasing since Chloe was born. I guess that was inevitable. But discipline, let's say you got the classic example of discipline, like every morning you get up and exercise. You're never going to have a consistency of feeling like doing that. Some mornings you'll be pumped, but most it'll be like, ugh. And discipline's doing it anyway. And I think self-discipline's the most difficult. Like we're talking about, if you got external factors like prompting you and pushing you, you can be disciplined by those. Like someone, you can become reliant on a partner, or reliant on kids, or reliant on a boss to like choose your hours for you. But you and I both know when you move to entrepreneurship, or you're living alone or something, you're just like, well, all the noise is gone, and you just go with what you feel all the time. And yeah, it's very easy to go lock in and procrastinate on other things. And yeah, I think discipline is probably one of the most difficult and necessary practices a human being can engage in for a healthy life.
There's a book called The Molecule of More that I really enjoyed. It's a bit of a technically flavored look at how dopamine works. One of the big takeaways I had from that book is that pretty much half of our brain functions seem to function on dopamine. There are actually 4 dopamine pathways that drive our thinking. Some of them are for instant gratification, very reptilian brain. I'm hungry, I want to eat fatty, sugary foods, I want sex, I want alcohol, whatever, cravings oriented. But just as importantly, our future oriented desires, life goals, ambitions, wanting to have abs, wanting to have that great relationship, wanting to build your business, those are also driven by dopamine. And so there was a period of time where I just thought dopamine's evil. Like it drives me towards the pizza and the beer and the, things that aren't benefiting me and where I want to go. But that's not the case at all. And what I've realized is if I look at my past, the reason I've been very successful at some periods of my life, in some areas of my life, is because I created an environment that focused my dopamine on the things where I get the most benefit. So when I'm starting my business, surrounded myself with good people, set up a site where I could work without any distractions, and we just went, hardcore into building that business, and it succeeded like nothing else. Same thing with family, relationships, raising kids. Put myself into that environment, was surrounded by it, didn't give myself any choices, basically. So like you're saying, part of it is feeling pulled into wanting to be a part of that. Part of it's feeling pushed. Other people have needs and demands and expectations on you, but all of them are pointing me in the same direction.
Yeah, right.
So when I would go to work, part of it was because, hey, this is exciting and fun, and I'm really enjoying it. Part of it was because if I don't, my employees have no idea what to do because I'm not there sort of conducting the orchestra. Part of it is because clients have deadlines. So I'm pushed and pulled in everything, but it's all towards the same target. And in those situations, my level of effectiveness and progress was 100 out of 100, right? Now what I've realized is that the world that I've created, the world that I'm in right now, is really only oriented towards work. Right? It's not oriented towards physical fitness, health. It's not organized in any specific way towards like social connection, relationships. Those are part of my life, but they're not prioritized in any sense of the way, in the way I've set up my world. And I begin to notice it because what happens is those normal demands, those little pushes and pulls of everyday existence. The emails you get when you wake up in the morning, the texts you get through the day, you know, they end up really sucking you into this vortex of where you're absolutely focused on one thing, but at the expense of everything else that's balanced. And I find it very hard to pull away from that. It's kind of a quicksand experience where you got into it, you felt safe, you felt in control. Suddenly you weren't so much in control anymore, and you're kind of flailing around just trying to stay afloat. And it becomes a very interesting exercise to say, well, discipline actually means sacrificing some of that. Like, I actually have to say no to myself about certain things that I want to do, or I have to say no to a client about certain things they're asking from me. I have to really, it's almost as though the people-pleasing nature is inward facing as well. That there's a sense of, I need to make me happy. It's like, no, you don't. Your job is to make you healthy and strong and you know, live a good, long, full life. It's not just to enjoy now or to be wealthy now or to have great relationships now. There's future stuff you have to consider in that equation. And if you don't, you're going to suffer.
Well, what I've been, along those lines, what I've been trying to figure out is if you get the want wrong, then you're doomed, right? Like what it is you're trying to achieve, whether you want to call that a goal or just a desire or a vision. If you don't get that right, or you're lying to yourself about what it is, and there's something else behind it that you're secretly going for, you're either going to procrastinate or overdo things, and usually those occur simultaneously, right? Procrastination is usually an excessive amount of another task or another type of tasks. What I've been trying to think of lately is what's a kind of image, a vision that would keep me on track, and more importantly, like the kind of instant gratification dopamine would override that urge, or would make it very hard for me to follow that urge without feeling very guilty. And one of the things that having a kid's helped me with is that for the first time maybe in my life, my focus has shifted from me being something that I like being, as being the primary goal, to being something that's of great benefit to her, which is actually still the same thing, but it's got this, like you said, it's a kind of a helpful external component to it. I'm like, this can't just be me like jerking off in the mirror just going, you're awesome. It has to be something that benefits her. And it's made me ask a very like careful question around what is an actual good father, not one that's particularly seen to be good necessarily, or one that like follows common so-called wisdom, but the one where as the father role, your impact gives her the best possible chance for a very high quality of life, for high self-confidence, for her to be as fruitful as she's possibly going to be, knowing that, that's only part of the pie. Other things are going to influence her, but also to create an influence that, should negative influences try to throw her off track, your influence counters those in some way, and that kind of thing. So 2 years I've been thinking about this and rethinking about it, plotting various points, reading scientific articles and books to see what works and what doesn't in an objective way, and so on. And the answer's pretty clear. It's a nice one, which is already just living with integrity goes a long way. Just being available goes a very long way. You don't have to do something special, just be there and be present in your focus. But more importantly, it's just that message keeps coming through, like, I need to be doing well. That's what's best for her. So what's best for my relationship and everything is that I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm very healthy, not just physically, but mentally. The healthier I am physically and mentally, combined with being available for her, guarantees basically the best possible influence I can have, because I'll be role modeling. She's going to copy what I do much more than she's going to listen to what I say. If she sees me eating healthy all the time, she sees me saying no to bad things and turning off screens when I've had enough, and if she sees me, being confrontational to unhealthy social influences, and she sees me having fun as much as I can, she's likely to copy that, essentially. And she's likely to look for guys like that, assuming she's straight. In her romantic future, she's going to prefer guys who are like that.
One of the things that I really enjoyed when my kids were in this age range, particularly between, I'd say, 3 and 12, they were just part of my life. They were intricately wrapped up in everything that I did. And I was very aware that they're watching me. They're learning from everything I do. They're learning from every decision I make. They're learning from how I balance my life between taking care of things like washing the dishes or cooking dinner, working, relationships, friendships, hobbies, health and fitness, all of it. They got to see me doing all of it. None of it was hidden from them. I simply didn't have the opportunity to hide it from them because I was a single dad. So they were always there with me. And one of the things I became acutely aware of was that me showing them that it was important to live a rich and full life, full of activities and friends and learning and hobbies and experiences, even as a single dad, challenging situation, was incredibly important for them. It was incredibly important for them to see that that was not just out of enjoyment, it was out of staying healthy and maintaining my integrity and being a rock for my family. They never saw me sacrifice those things. I was quite fortunate. Like I did those things because I needed to do them, but I also did them because I realized they needed me to do them. They needed me to do them so that I could be the dad that they needed. If I was entirely focused on them, at some point, exhaustion, resentment, frustration, lack of purpose, spinning compass, all of that was going to be their reality and their perception of, well, this is what it's like to be a dad. That kind of sucks.
Mm.
But that would be their family experience. I could not let that happen. I did not want that to happen. So I found that a really, really compelling reason to invest the time I did. It never felt wasted. And they got involved in so many things. They tried martial arts. They got into Aikido and karate. They did acro yoga, some acrobatic stuff. They did Japanese drumming for about 2 years, did some performances on stage, went for some epic hikes, did random art projects. We'd take apart a TV that wasn't working anymore. It was just anything we could do that was interesting and fun and where we could learn. They were a part of that. And it was that kind of, I got to sort of immerse them in my own core values. The experience of being me. It's like, I'm curious, how does this work? Let's find out. We'd rip it apart together and we'd hit the internet and try to figure out what this thing was. And it was a great adventure for them. And I think that's the key is life's meant to be an adventure. If it feels like an adventure, like you don't know what's around the next corner and that's super exciting because you're right up against it, you're probably in the right place. If it feels like everything is predictable, you're probably so deep into the comfort zone that you're going to struggle to find your way out. And you're almost certainly not growing or challenging yourself or your kids, if you have kids, in any meaningful way. And that became, to me, that felt like death. The few times I found myself in that place, I was like, this sucks.
Mm.
This is not even living. And I certainly didn't feel like I could be the role model that they deserved, when I was there.
Mm. Well, yeah, it's interesting because we've kind of got two separate dilemmas. One is I've got the dilemma of the people pleasing urge and sacrificing myself, which I do like successfully battle against sometimes, but I've been slipping a lot since she was born. And then you've got the dilemma of no one watching you and nobody, to be held to account to large periods of time. And both of those are quite dangerous places for discipline, I think. When I look at what I need to do, is basically it's that crazy quote that I get from Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week. For big good things to happen, little bad things need to happen. And like for me to be the dad she needs, sometimes I have to do things that upset both her and Lucy. I have to like not be available in order to be better available, and have to take care of myself before I take care of them sometimes, and so on. Something I've preached a lot, but been hypocritical about as well.
It's hard to put into practice.
It is, and like I said, maybe I'm making excuses, but I feel like they're real barriers. That combo, like I said, of fuck all sleep. I'm lucky to get 4 hours sleep a night for 2 years now. And me and Lucy. And Lucy's far more devastated by it than I am. So I've kind of got caring for her on top of that. And then, like, a large percentage of the time, there's no one to leave Chloe with. We don't get a break from Chloe. Which she's just started daycare and then she got sick instantly, so she's back. That combo is just, I couldn't get my head above water, And then you think about that, and then like the car breaks down, or I have dental problems on top of that, and just reaching for the surface every day, like one breath, just give me one fucking breath. Like the only break I get in the day is the time that Lucy and I spend together when Chloe has her nap, and that time's so important to me that I don't want to use it all with a workout. But that's the only time I could do a workout unless I find some sort of magic spot. But as I hear myself talk, there are excuses there. Like, can I not do a 10-minute HIIT workout somewhere in the day? Of course I can. It just won't be the time I prefer, and it won't be in like a gym. It'll be on my bedroom floor and bumping into stuff, but that's not an obstacle. The thing is, that's the discipline thing, is you have to do this almost cold light of day, write down what your day should look like if you're being the man you should be, and then force yourself to do that no matter how you feel, essentially. Kind of follow your own instructions made when you're rational, when you're feeling irrational. And I think, a person, we've seen it with, like, you get it with all those military guys like Goggins and Jocko Willink and all those guys. This is their fucking mastery. This is what they're strong in. The guy runs every day no matter what. The guy makes his bed every day no matter what. And they, of course, will have other problems, which is they'll be disciplined to such an extent where they follow the rules even if the rules need to change. If the rules are no longer appropriate or a situation grants an override, they'll go like, no, too bad. Perhaps, I'm guessing. But that's why discipline is such a complex and nuanced idea, of mixture of rigidity and flexibility, of being able to like take in the context and decide which of those is appropriate. Do I go with the plan, or is now the time to break it without being influenced by how you feel in the moment, but through logical nightmare? It's difficult.
I've found some tools that really help me with discipline, and they're basic things like having a cheat day. You're allowed to have good, fun things that are purely for the enjoyment of it. Ice cream, whatever it is for you. But once a week. Sunday is that day. And I find little tools like that help tremendously, because from a psychological perspective, you're not telling your inner child, whatever, no, in which case it's just going to rebel and scream and pull things off the shelves. You're saying, not yet. You can have cake after you eat your broccoli, And I found that, using tools like that on myself were really, really beneficial in helping me to stay focused. But one of the tools I found most interesting that really benefited me was where I took what I call the 5 areas of lifestyle design and just wrote them down on a sheet of paper. So it was inner self, like, how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, am I journaling, am I meditating, those types of things. Health and fitness, wealth, relationships, and then future mission and purpose. Those are my 5 columns. And at the start of each week, I'd go to a cafe with Starbucks locally, sit down, and I'd actually write out what do I want to accomplish this week in each of these 5 areas. I just made a very simple map. This is only for 1 week. Am I going to hit the gym 3 times this week? Am I going to do some yoga classes? Am I going to dancing? What am I working on, in terms of writing projects or new products or systems I'm building? Who am I going to go see and hang out with? Everything was on there. It only took half an hour to sort of sketch out, like, here's what I want to do. And that would stick. Kind of like, what do I need to do today? What are my priorities today? And what I found really interesting, and we've had this discussion about just one thing versus where do you spend your resources. But for me,
hang on just a sec.
I found that sort of splitting my. Sure.
You're cutting in and out quite badly, but it might have just come right now. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, take
Yeah,
it
I saw
again.
it. I saw it flicker for a moment there.
Yeah.
So one of the things I found really beneficial about this approach was that I found myself moving forward in every area of my life that I cared about, rather than just moving forward really fast in one, but all the other areas were falling backwards, backsliding. I was moving forward in all of them very steadily. And one of the very interesting facets of that is if there was ever a time when anything kind of went off the cliff, any part of my life, a relationship, a work project, a health situation, whatever it is, all those other areas were really stable. So the experience for me wasn't like, oh crap, my life's in the shitter now. It was, oh, this isn't ideal, but all these other things are going great. Let's double down on those while we wait for this dental issue to take care of itself or whatever. I've gone through those exact same situations. It was really helpful to kind of see clearly where I was making progress. It really helped me psychologically. So I keep thinking about that. I keep thinking about the fact that I haven't done that balancing act in ages. I haven't even printed off one of those sheets or ever sat down with a coffee and said, well, what do I want to accomplish? What are my goals? And when I don't do that, I find myself in the quicksand in no time flat.
Well, that's the key, I think, is there needs to be a single practice that has a domino effect, where if you engage in it, you can't help but become disciplined by following through on it, and you just described yours. Probably it'd be interesting to see you go and apply that, in the next 48 hours and see if it does the trick. I'm sure it will. If it's worked before, it will work again, usually, right? And that's what I've been working on as well. I'm trying to think now, like, how did I suddenly become disciplined with my health? And like at the time, like I said, this dental issue put me on antibiotics, which means I can't work out because I'll just fucking pass out. They're so strong. And like, my wife's really struggling because I'm trying to eat all healthy and she's eating normal, and how do we cook and all that. So there's all these barriers, but I'm fucking on point. Like, apart from not being able to do what I can't do, I'm not slipping. I'm only cheating on the cheat day and so on. And when I think about why I got here, what stands out to me is there's a long-term and a short-term technique that have worked. The long-term one is journaling, honestly. And for a long time now, I've been writing about how disappointed I am in what I'm doing about my health. And it builds up a healthy guilt motivator. So I haven't been, at least very recently, I have not been lying to myself about what's happening with my health. I've been like, I've neglected myself. I'm eating like shit. I could have exercised, but I didn't. I just talked myself out of it, blah, blah, blah. And every time I have to write that, I'm like, fuck, I'm writing this again, like, what, I don't want to be around for Chloe? Like, what is this bullshit? Just getting mad at myself, essentially, for pathetic behavior and pathetic excuses and so on. And that has a long-term effect. Like, if you're very honest with yourself and your measurements, it becomes impossible to ignore. And you just start getting that cognitive dissonance all the time. And then what I've done, which I think really pulled the trigger for me more recently, is creating in the moment cognitive dissonance, which is I'm allowed to do anything I want, anything at all, as long as I ask myself a question like, is this living by the value of respect? Or I might ask a question as like, me being my ideal self, is this what he would do? Or is this the best you can do right now? There's certain questions I play with, different ones. Usually, like with my clients, they'll find one question that really like hits the mark for them. They just squirm when it's answered because they just can't get away from the answer, and it's just glaring, and they can't they can maybe go ahead with the bad behavior, but they can't enjoy it. It's like ruined it for them. Because this one guy might say like, my original question was always like, what would a confident man do right now? And you go and do the opposite, and you're like, oh, I'm just being a total fucking pussy. And something you might usually enjoy, like jerking it to porn or smoking some weed or eating a big cake, is just soured for you. You just feel bad doing it. You don't feel bad later like usual. You feel bad during. And it allowed me to kind of, that's in my maintenance go-to. So whenever I get little compulsions and urges, I think, what have I been asked? Mostly I've been asking myself the respect question. I'll be like, is this respecting your body, or is this respecting the plan? Is this respecting your fatherhood ideal, you know? And I'll be looking at, like, I don't know, it's not cake in our house, but it might be biscuits or something. I'll be like, really? You're going to eat that instead of respecting yourself? And I was like, fuck, no, I can't have the biscuits.
One of the perspectives that I like a lot on exactly this approach is to frame it as anything I do, anything I don't do consciously is a choice. It's a choice I'm making. So if I choose, I don't, I actually feel like going to the gym today. I'm a bit tired. I didn't get much sleep. I actually have to say to myself, I'm choosing to be unhealthy.
Right.
I'm choosing to get fatter. I'm choosing to live less long and to be further away from, ideal fitness goals. That's a choice. And if you're very aware, if I say that out loud, like I'm choosing right now, if I do this, I'm choosing, and it makes things very clear. This can't slip under the radar unnoticed, right? This is a conscious choice that I'm making. And that's very powerful. So I actually have to it becomes self-confrontational, right? Yeah, finding that right question that really kind of pushes you, because for me in particular, I would never consciously want to do things that cause me harm. So that one actually pushes me hard, right? If I say, I know I'm choosing this unhealthy decision, whatever it is, I feel that. I feel that hard. I'm like, oh, it just doesn't, it doesn't feel right, And I'll stay awake over that.
Yeah, I like that one. I think what we're seeing is a combo here, which is discipline has elements of both responsibility and respect. Discipline is about respect, it's doing what's right, and responsibility is about realizing whose job it is to do that thing, which is yourself. And I love that. I've used that one many times myself as well. Like, what am I really choosing? Not what am I not choosing? What am I choosing? And it's been very powerful since having a daughter. Like, okay, I'm choosing to be a poor role model for Chloe so that she ends up being a weak ass bitch that, like, life just shits all over. I'm choosing that right now by eating this in front of her. And he's just holding it, like, shaking, like, oh, I can't do that to her, It's fucking horrible. And it's not untrue. I mean, I've been this isn't for everyone, but it's a type of language that works well. I like hard, brutal language. Like, when I get a coach, I always ask them, like, just fucking go to town, bro. Like, don't be soft with me. Like, hurt me. Like, it's well, because I'm so resistant to authority, I need a big whack, And I find it funny, which helps me motivate and stuff. But I've been watching a lot of Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay. That's my new thing. It's my only, like, break in the day, I guess. We watch one of those together. And he's got a very specific style that appears to be very effective, which is mostly insults that are very, very accurate, but without, like, rancor. Like, he'll be happily working alongside that person 5 minutes later. He doesn't hold a grudge, but he'll say very, very accurately cruel things to them. And I like talking to myself like that, like, oh, so you're going to be a little bitch who's in denial. That's the guy you want to be? You're going to be a fucking obese fat ass that has to waddle everywhere. Like, that's an awesome guy to be. Good luck. You want everyone to see that. You want to be that. That's your role model. This the coach who doesn't take care of himself. Awesome. What a cool guy. And this isn't for everyone. For some people, that's actually their self-talk that they use to demotivate themselves. But for my personality type, perhaps, maybe it's the challenge. I'm actually creating an authority figure I now want to prove wrong, even though that figure is me. And it's kind of like, I'll fucking show you. I can do some push-ups. Sometimes it backfires. I literally backfired this morning. Where I was like, I'll finish my antibiotics and then I'll do work exercise again. And it's like, what? You're just going to believe the doctors, And I think you're frozen up a bit there. You back? Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can see you now.
Yeah. I was like, what? You going to let the doctors tell you how to live, you little bitch? So I dropped and did some push-ups and then almost passed out. I'm like, oh wait, they weren't lying. I'm fucked. But the upside to that, I mean, I stopped, you know. But the upside to that was I didn't just take something at their word. I went and tested it. Now I feel very like guilt-free about not exercising. Like I made sure that this was not an excuse. This wasn't me pussying out. This was a genuine barrier. Because I think that's one of the biggest issues to discipline that I see in my clients, more than my own problems maybe, but is the difficulty distinguishing the difference between an actual barrier and an imagined one. You know, you think of going to the gym when you're pushing out that last rep. Is it actually that you can't lift it, or do you just think you can't? You know, we talked about that before. You can usually got another 3 in you. The muscles still have room to grow, but your mind's given up. And people say, I see this with people pleasing and in myself, you know, but my partner's really sick, right? And that stops you doing push-ups. How exactly? Like, is she grabbing you and throwing up in your face while you're trying to do push-ups? Or is it just you feel uncomfortable neglecting her, which isn't actually a real thing stopping you? And that, you know, being able to distinguish that difference, that's why I had to go do push-ups even though I knew I shouldn't, is I had to figure out if this is a real barrier or not. I had to go, okay, no, my body's like shutting down as I do this. I'll listen to the doctors for once, you know?
Yeah, don't the Navy SEALs have something that Joko brings up? So I think it's called the 40% rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea that when you feel exhaustion, you're only 40% of the way to failure. You still have way further to go. And I think that can be very true, particularly when it comes to endurance challenges. Maybe not, you can't lift 150% more, but you can probably run 150% further if you just buckle in. But yeah, that is really interesting. And when we talk about the concept of self discipline and the sort of what goes on in your head, I can't help but think that people pleasing plays a big part of it, even though it's people pleasing towards yourself. It's this sense of, I don't want to create negative emotions unnecessarily because it'll make my world hell. All right? It's that kind of confrontation avoidant behavior. Um, and it kind of makes sense because the guys that really know how to push themselves, the sort of elite athletes out there, I'd never really considered this before, but I can't immediately identify anybody where I'd say that super athlete is a people pleaser. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and this may be the first time I'm thinking about it too. Both those elements. One is that people pleasing includes yourself as a person. So you know that's part of the people that you try to please. Maybe the one you're actually trying to please the most would be a very accurate statement. You're always trying to make him feel comfortable. So that's interesting. I have thought about that, but not like that before. Like it's another people that you're pleasing, sort of thing. And I agree. Like I've studied a lot of very disciplined, highly successful people, and generally, the more rigid and disciplined someone is, the less conscientious they are. To the point where I'd be considering that Goggins is high in psychopathy and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, military guys who kill people and stuff, there must be a level of psychopathy there. They don't back down from shooting a stranger in the face, you know. But yeah, well, okay, there are exceptions. I think a great one, if you ever want to get into it, Andre Agassi, his book Open. Shocking revelation about him is he fucking hates tennis and always has. From the minute he picked up a racket, he's hated every second of it, basically. I mean, he had highs, like brittle kind of like validation and approval highs, but tennis was always just this demon for him. He wasn't doing it out of passion for the tennis, but it starts with impressing his very overpowering dad. And, you know, his dominating dad, who he always wanted love from, but could never get it unless he won a game of tennis, through to like winning the crowd and having the medals and having people see that he's got Brooke Shields as a missus and all this kind of stuff. He's like, the book is very aptly named Open. It's such a great fucking title for a book because it's about tennis and it's about him opening up. Fucking beautifully done. I don't know if he wrote it by himself or had a biographer, but it's one of the most transparent, honest reads I've ever had from an autobiography. Most people are a bit self-aggrandizing. This guy was just like totally open about just near constant suffering mentally, but the compulsion, he couldn't give it up. Like if he hadn't been good at it, he wouldn't have kept doing it. So it was almost people-pleasing was his discipline. And so there may be, and now I think about it, I think there's either going to be zero people-pleasing. The discipline is like, fuck you, I do what's right for me, and then we'll talk about you. Or the exact opposite, where someone's very disciplined because they're like being watched and other people depend on them and they get approval and validation for doing it right.
I hadn't heard of his story before. That's quite amazing. And I actually hadn't heard of it in the realm of, like super athletes in sports very often. But I've heard of it very frequently in communities like professional dance.
Mm-hmm.
Where from the time someone was a little child, they had to please their parents. So they went to ballet and they, broke their feet and pushed it every day and had to be the best. And, or the girls that are raised into sort of the beauty pageants, same thing. They have to be perfect because it's the only way their parents will accept them. It's 100% people pleasing. But the effect, rather than being a glass ceiling, it's more like coals under their feet.
Yeah, right.
Make them keep dancing. It's very interesting. It's a very powerful thing, and when you internalize that, in the case of like Agassi, is that I imagine that he at some point realized that he's good enough to get validation from others, including his dad, and therefore he can't possibly stop. He has to be the best. He has to push himself, not because he loves tennis, because he felt that need for approval secondhand from his dad. He couldn't approve of himself unless he had that approval from others. It's people pleasing, all right? But in a very different way. And what's interesting, if you've read Goggins' bio as well, there's a similar twist to it, but it was more about himself than about someone external, like parents. There's a point where he just looked in the mirror and said, I can't handle this anymore. And hated himself to the point that he actually had to change to just be able to live with himself. Decided to push himself extremely in the opposite direction and never stopped. I mean, nearly killed himself several times, just because he didn't know how to stop at that point and be okay with it.
Well, I think, that's a key difference, because the discipline that Andre Agassi has doesn't actually meet our definition from earlier of doing the right thing. He's actually doing the wrong thing. He's just doing it very consistently and very frequently and to an extreme level of effort. So he's very consciously being bad. It's like a Nazi soldier with a high body count. Like, they're very disciplined, but, they spend the rest of their life having nightmares and guilt. So they're not actually doing the right thing. So that's not discipline. Whereas Goggins is an interesting case because nobody but him, and maybe not even him, will ever know if he's actually doing the right thing. What do we know is he's doing the thing that is a counter reaction to the disgust that he felt about himself. And you're right, like I guess it was always about other people, and Goggins is very self-centered, but not in the way that's connotated. Just he does it for him. I mean, the title of his book is like, it's funny the difference in those book titles. Like, Andre is open, and Goggins is can't hurt me. Like, fuck you. So I guess even with his book, there's an element of like, please feel for me, please love me for the damaged person I am. And Goggins is like, read my book or don't. I don't give a fuck you all. Right, this because I'm the fucking man. So there's a kind of a, not grandiosity. I think Goggins actually has a humility that allows him to always identify his weaknesses, but he goes so far as to go like, is he achieving his definition of healthy? Which means like wrecking your body's okay as long as you're satisfied in your mind about who you are. Or is he actually being unhealthy? Because there's plenty of evidence that there's a very obsessive quality. There's, from his own words, he seems to struggle to connect with people. He's only like friends with his Marine buddies and like nothing else. Everybody else he's suspicious of and distrustful of. I think he has a partner, but the fact that she's not even mentioned in the book, I find fascinating. Like, she doesn't take up that much of his mind to warrant a paragraph.
Or a few that came and went through the story.
Yeah, like, maybe it's not relevant to the story, but the point is, like, I see some red flags in his approach, Whereas, like, you could say that that's discipline, but if discipline, the word requires a healthy set of activity, like you have to be doing the right thing, then I don't know if he actually is disciplined, if he's just rigid.
Now I think we're basically introducing a new concept, a new definition. Discipline in its raw form of being able to push yourself towards future goals, and with a with an immediate sacrifice. That's sort of the common view of discipline. By
Right.
that measure, Goggins is ultra disciplined.
Right.
He does not enjoy today, but tomorrow keeps getting a little bit better the more he pushes himself, and he's pushed himself through some enormous challenges, to get where he's at. And he's not the only one who follows that pattern by far. Sir Edmund Hillary, and
Mhm.
discipline's a fascinating topic there. But that key question: is this benefiting you? What's the end goal here? Why? Why are you doing this? Is it just so you can look in the mirror and feel you're not weak? Or are you actually turning yourself into a better person? Are you running from something, or are you headed towards something? And it's a big question. A lot of people don't actually stop to ask. They're like, no, I just need to overcome who I am. Okay, but where are you going to then? What's the destination? And they don't have a map. So I think what we're actually talking about is something along the lines of a distinction between, what this reminds me of is the distinction between shame and authenticity shame.
Mhm.
So shame being this idea that something about you is wrong just because you're a flawed and useless human, versus the feeling that something is wrong because it goes against your core values. And that's a valuable form of shame. Here we're talking about discipline versus authenticity discipline.
Right.
The idea that you're actually doing this to be more authentic, to be more real, and to become a better version of yourself. And if you can achieve that, it's worth every drop of sweat you can pour into it. But it's very difficult for a lot of people to even tell what that is.
But you know what? This I think you're on track, because there's discipline, which is just a neutral tool. It depends what you point it at. The ability to do the thing that aligns with the goal as opposed to other distractions. But like I said, you could be a disciplined Nazi soldier, and your end result is, tried as a war criminal and executed. Like, who wins there? Nobody. Well, it made me think of two contrasting stories. So one that came into my mind was Muhammad Ali. And he's often quoted as saying he hated every step of practice. He fucking hated running. He hated all of it. But he's just like, I'm going to be the master. I'm going to be the man. And that was always it. I'm going to be the champion of the world. And he's like, whatever it takes to do that, I don't care how I feel. But his is an interesting case. His decline in his old age is directly related to boxing. He suffered brain injuries, and that's why he had his, his whatever technically he was given, the shaky can't talk thing. And so his final years were a kind of stutter and stumble and roll down the hill. I mean, I'm sure he had good times, but I doubt it was his ideal. So he paid a very heavy price to be the man, very heavy price. And compare that to a story I heard recently. Do you remember Police Academy, those comedy movies? There's like 8 of them.
Yeah.
And Hightower, the tall black guy, made the noises.
Yeah.
Well, nobody really knows that he disappeared after those movies. Nothing really came of it. Well, I don't know. I can't remember the full story off the top of my head. Definitely worth looking up. Basically, what happened was a family crisis. And I think his partner died and left him with a child, maybe more than one. The story's out there on the internet, easy to find. And he was left with this dilemma. Continue with this career that's just on fire right now. Like, I am that guy. I've got millions of people copying me and trying to be me. I can turn this into something. Or be there for my child. And he chose to step down from the spotlight. Similar to that guy who was in, like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and how he disappeared for similar reasons. These actors that right at their prime, they just disappear to do something that was noble. And, Hightower, like, he's kind of coming back now. He's doing, like, comedy tours and shit, and everyone's like, who's this dude? What's up with the noises? But is that disciplined? To step back from the grand goal, to step back from the, what do you call that?
It's right at the cusp of success.
Yeah, and there's a certain type of glory. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But glory in favor of being just a good dad, or in favor of just taking care of your health so you can make the most of the time you have, or whatever, these things that aren't glory, that aren't like, people are not going to write about you. Actually, they are writing about Hightower, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But the story that isn't what everybody would call discipline, perhaps. They would say that, you stop being disciplined if they didn't know the full case. But I think of Hightower like to step back from all that right at his fingertips. I don't even know his real name. To just be a good dad to his kid, and just, how if you don't take the wave, you just fade instantly. Everybody, 5 years later, nobody knows who I'm talking about, right? And just to be a good dad, just to be able to take her to school and pick her up, help her with the grief of losing her mum, or I think that, that, for me, that's discipline. Imagine how hard that would have been, that decision.
I'll just share this story because it's on my mind as you're sharing the story of Hightower. In the U.S., I have a friend who told me about his childhood experiences. He's one of 5 kids, big family. I think he's the youngest of 5 kids. So he one day came home from school with his brothers, and one of the brothers went inside and then came straight back out and said nobody's going in to the house. Apparently there had been a horrible breaking and entering, and both of his parents were slain, and kids came across it. So he didn't see this situation, but his brothers did. Immediately there were suddenly 5 orphans just trying to cope with, oh my God, what do we even do? What do we even happen? So the dad had a brother who lived in a state nearby in the U.S. and had 2 kids and a wife and a new family, and he'd just gotten a home started, and he'd just gotten a job, and they're just kind of making it, just starting to get their life together. Suddenly finds out about what's happened to his brother, and that his 5 nephews are suddenly without a family. It's like, looked at his wife and said, there's no way in hell they're going to an orphanage. She said, nope. Suddenly they had 7 kids living in their house. That is a radical 90-degree turn in your life to make that commitment without hesitation. And that always fascinated me as a guy who knew what he was about. Right. And his wife as well. Absolutely. She was, 100% as much part of this decision. But they absolutely knew that family mattered to them far more than comfort or success or space or their new home or their new job. All of that was going to get set aside in favor of doing what they really believed in. And to me, that sort of exemplifies the best of what discipline is about, is realizing that your values sometimes require sacrifices, sudden radical change, shifts of direction, hard decisions, right? Big decisions, life-changing decisions. And that when you know who you are and what you care about, those decisions, you don't have to think about them. Yeah. You know the answer before they even arrive. I love hearing stories about people that find themselves in that situation and immediately know what the answer is, even though it's radically unexpected and radically challenging.
Well, I think, and this is maybe a good way to sort of wrap it and present a final case, there's kind of 2 sides to what we'll call from now on authentic discipline. So this is discipline where you live by your values no matter how you feel. Not just you do a set task no matter how you feel. Now, there is some structure to it. Like, if my value is health, it helps to have a morning workout every morning that I do no matter how I feel. But values would also say if I'm injured or antibiotics or whatever, I skip the workout. So there would be some nuance, because the values are overriding thing. It's not about working out. It's about being healthy. Being healthy sometimes dictates I must do something else. But also being healthy is about consistency and frequency and regularity. So it helps to, prep my meals and all that. It all contributes to the value. But what I love is I think you know that you're disciplined with integrity. You have that authentic discipline. If a big curveball comes out of nowhere and you can make your decision in less than 10 seconds with no residual guilt or doubt about what that decision should be, huge life-changing. And that's what I think I've found is when I've been on point with integrity, like I remember when Lucy was like, well, maybe you could come live in Czech. And I was just like, all right. That was it. I was like, I don't need to figure out why I said yes. I know I'm on point right now. Like, and it was huge. I mean, I'm talking about everything possibly changing. I was just like, no, that's the right thing to do. It's got to be done. And I didn't even need to really figure out why. Whereas, I know I'm lost when I'm haggling over little things. I was like, oh, maybe we should do this and do that. And I'm like, man, I've lost track of my compass. My compass should just be. The funny thing, the freedom of integrity is you actually lose your autonomy in a way, which is like your compass makes your decisions for you. You're just like, what should I do, brain? That, all right, you say so. I don't feel like it, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah, it feels like the route on the map is like written in red magic marker and isn't going to change.
There's no other path to take.
In a way, that's freeing because within the bounds of that, headed north according to your compass, you're totally free to make any of the small decisions you want along the way. The big decisions have already been made.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
I really enjoy that. And it's funny to hear you talk about, like the experience of discipline. It does feel like there's this war going on between what you know is right, what you want, what your future is about, who you want to become. That's in your head. It's reasonably clear for most of us. And what feels comfortable. And anytime you feel that struggle of, oh, which way should I go? It's usually a battle between those two halves of yourself.
Yeah, right.
I want to be fit. No, pizza and ice cream. Oh, they sound so nice. That's 90% of the cognitive dissonance that I experience, right? And the thing is, when you're being authentic and when you're really being disciplined according to your values, that argument should be pretty tame because you know very clearly what the benefit of staying on course is and the big win that you get. You get a huge reward for that, just not today.
Yeah. And I think, and that's what I've noticed my shift lately to become disciplined with health. Is those little bits of oh, I can't be bothered working. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you can. We're doing it anyway. It's really not an argument. It's more like a parent with a child, and the parent is definitely the one in charge. And it's just going, I know you don't want to do that today. You can do it later, but we're doing it now. And I like that. I like when I'm in that state. Because I feel like in the health section of my life, I've been out of that state for so long. And I've just felt that kind of lostness and that guilt of mistreating myself, that sense of being disrespected. But also feeling powerless. I'm like, I seem to have reasonable excuses. Like, there seems to be this wall I'm hitting as if I'm really trying. But the wall was I wasn't willing to let go of other people's feelings. I wasn't willing to let some other key people in this house get upset while I took care of business. And now I am. So I got a bit of the Goggins ruthlessness going. And also, it feels like ruthlessness, but of course, whenever I actually follow through, I'm like, they're not doing that bad. That suffering was in my head. Like, they can handle. They're fucking capable human beings. I was making them out to be weaker in my head than they actually are. And who knows why I was doing that, but I was wrong, so stop doing that, So it'll be interesting. I think we'll both apply our approaches. I'll be keen to hear what happens when you do your little 5-point exercise again. And I'm going to keep up with my berating myself in a loving manner. You're going to keep being a bitch or what?
All the tools. Yeah.
Goggins.
Yep. Looking forward to see the changes.
Yep.
See you again in about 3 weeks.
All right, dude.
Chat soon, man.
Yes, good stuff.